So sorry for this technical issue. I am Inessa. I'm the co-founder of MuseumLab, and today with us is also Dorina Jere, that is a museum expert from Albania. She is the founder of MuseumLab. I will just say a few short, I will do just a short introduction about MuseumLab. MuseumLab was founded in January 2021 in Durrës, Albania. And the mission is creating a new philosophy of using the discipline of museology, heritage, and culture as a way of educating society, advocating for museums and their professionals, and creating civic activism and dialogue through various forms of heritage, arts, and creativity. Today with us is Laura Bedford, that is, she's head of educational programmer, if I'm not wrong, from KidsinMuseums. It's an organization in London. She will introduce the work of kids in museums in the UK, outlining why this charity exists and its current programs such as Takeover Day and the Family Friendly Museum Award and their impact. Laura, welcome.
Hi everyone. Do you want me to start presentation or?
Yeah, if you want to say maybe a few things about Kids in Museums, or if Kids in Museums like organization is part of the PowerPoint presentation, you can just start with it.
Yeah, it's part of the PowerPoint. So do you want me to start sharing?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi everyone. So what I thought I'd do is give you a sort of brief introduction to Kids in Museums, and then I'm going to give you a bit of an overview about, I suppose, our work in a bit more detail, and also kind of why we exist. And then we have something called the Manifesto, which I'll talk about in a moment, but basically I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that and kind of how to meet our manifesto in no and low cost ways. So we try to keep it really accessible for museums. So as Inessa mentioned, I'm the head of programs at Kids in Museums, and Kids in Museums is a small charity. We're based in the UK and we work with museums across the UK to make them more welcoming and inclusive for children, young people and families. And we do this in a variety of different ways. So our 6-point manifesto is put together with children, young people and families, and we update that every 2 to 3 years. It basically tells the kind of museums in the UK what makes a really good day out at a museum from a family, young people and children's perspective. So I'll be talking about that in a bit more detail later. We have our annual Family Friendly Museum Award, and the ceremony for the award for this year was last week, so it's hot off the press. I will go through the winners so you kind of see who won this year's award, but it's the only award in the UK that's judged by families. So we have families going into museums to find out how family friendly they are. We have Takeover Day, and that's where children and young people take over staff roles for the day. And this year it's on the 18th of November. I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail later too. And we have Digital Takeover Day, and that's where young people take over social media platforms for the day. And that took place on the 1st of July this year. We also have a range of online resources, and I've said to Inessa that if she wants to send the presentation out to you after the session today, she's very welcome to, and we've got lots of links at the end of the session to some of our resources on our website, so you can have a look at those after the session. We also do a lot of training consultancy work as well, so that's a big part of what I do as head of programs. So I thought I'd start with sort of why family visitors are really important to museums in the UK, so a bit of context, but also about why Kids in Museums exists in the first place. So the benefits for kind of families visiting museums in the UK. So some of the data from this has come from the Audience Agency. They are UK based. They do a lot of surveys with visitors in museums in the UK, and they found that 35% of all audiences in museums in the UK are kind of family groups. So 35% is quite a large percentage of the visitor profile for a lot of museums. So obviously those families contribute towards the attendance figures for those museums. They also contribute in terms of spend, so spending money in the cafe and the shop as well. And 22% of those audiences stated that they really like the to go to museums, to spend time together with friends and also family as well. And we found when we talked to families, when we put together our manifesto, that families really, really loved that time together and making memories for the future. Families also like to visit museums to educate, entertain and socialise with their children. So it's a really big part of that for a lot of families in the UK. A decade-long US study also found that if people visited museums as children, they were 3 to 4 times more likely to visit as an adult. So we know that if families go to museums and the children really enjoy themselves, they're more likely to take their children when they get older. So it's kind of building those visitors for the future. And also a more recent study, so from the Cultural Learning Alliance reports, they found that if children engage with arts and culture at a young age, they're more likely to vote, to volunteer, to go on to study in later life, but also that museum visits and being involved with cultural activities really helps to improve cognitive abilities, develop skills, behaviours, and also benefits their health. So we know it's good for their well-being as well. However, although we know that museums are great for children and families and for young people, there's quite a lot of hurdles and barriers to participation. So in 2016, Kids in Museums created a report called Hurdles to Participation, and we looked at some of those barriers. So that includes practical barriers that could be, for example, economic barriers, so not actually going to be able to afford to get to the museum or pay the entrance fee. A lot of museums in the UK have free entry, but some are paid for. So some children and families might struggle to pay the entrance fee. It might be practical barriers in terms of getting to the museum. So if the museum is in quite a sort of a location that's not in a city centre, it might be really difficult for that family to get there if they don't have a car, for example, and the public transport isn't very good. There's social and attitudinal barriers. So going back to that idea of not having a good time in a museum as a child. So for example, if they went on a school visit, didn't really enjoy themselves and didn't really think that museums were for them, they might not then take their children when they're older. So just thinking through some of those kind of barriers in terms of how families perceive museums. Also pressure on sort of partners. So in the UK, a lot of schools visit museums, particularly primary schools, so younger children go to museums. And so a lot of children, that's their first time that they've been to a museum. And if they don't have a good time during a school visit, they might not come back and they might not get their parents to take them back to the museum afterwards. Also, we found that if museums don't ask or don't collaborate with families and young people about what they want to get out of a museum visit, then often families don't feel very engaged with their local museum and they won't go. So just a bit of research I thought I'd share with you. So Derby Museums have undertaken quite a big redevelopment project. They created a new museum called the Museum of Making, and that opened last year. And they did quite a lot of research when they were putting together their plans for redeveloping the museum. So they asked a lot of families and other visitors in Derby, so it's quite a big city in the UK, kind of why they weren't visiting the museum and who their competition was. So they found out for a lot of families, families would prefer to go to the cinema, things like shopping centres, but they wouldn't want to go to a museum. And when asked why they didn't want to go to a museum, they were saying that they didn't really view museums as being a really fun day out for their family. They thought they were too educational, that they might get told off if they're being too noisy as a family. So they didn't really feel like they wanted to go. So it's quite interesting to know what kind of puts off families for visiting museums in the UK. Also, for a lot of families, particularly those that have got additional needs, that might be special educational needs or disabilities, that they might not feel welcome in museums either. So there was a survey that was done pre-pandemic, so pre-COVID, in about 2019 by Ecclesiastical, and they found that 29% of parents with children with additional needs felt unwelcome in a museum or a heritage site, even to the point of being asked to leave. So that could be that they were maybe behaving in a way that maybe was very different from other visitors, and so the staff didn't understand and they were told to leave the museum. So that's really difficult to sort of hear about that feedback. And then bring it right up to date. So some reports from this year. So obviously because of COVID, a lot of museums have closed for some periods over the last couple of years. But we found that actually families have been really keen to go back to museums between lockdowns. So between the times when museums were shut. So they were really more likely than other visitors to want to go back to those. And particularly for those museums that are in greener spaces outside of city centres, they really saw a big change in their visitor profile away from older visitors who were there to sort of traditional visitors that will come and visit them to families. So it's been a big change in the museum world in the last couple of years. And also ALVA, who's the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions, they've been doing a lot of tracking over the last couple of years of kind of visitor intentions about going to museums, and they found that at the big summer this year that they found a lot of families and other visitors are really keen to go back to museums in the summer and the autumn this year, but the main barriers that were coming up for them wasn't COVID anymore, but it was the cost of living crisis. So because of things like food being more expensive or fuel, being able to heat your homes are more expensive, then for a lot of visitors, including families, they thought this might put them off going to museums because they couldn't afford a day out. And then thinking about young people, so kids in museums kind of, I suppose our age group is kind of 0 to 25. So we go right the way up to kind of younger people. And in terms of the context around young people and museums in the UK, so Ecclesiastical, that organisation that did the other survey that I mentioned a moment ago, they found that more than a third of 18 to 30-year-olds never visit galleries, and just under 1 in 5 never visit museums in the UK. They also found that for the Department of Digital Culture and Media and Sport, so that's some of the bigger funded museums like the V&A, the British Museum in London, they found that only 12% of those aged 16 to 24 felt that those museums were telling stories that were relevant for them. So it would make them want to visit because those museums were telling relevant stories, but they weren't. So, and they were less likely to go along. And the audience agency found that 16 to 24-year-olds are less likely than other age groups to want to recommend their museum experience to other young people, and that only 1% of those aged 16 to 25 visitors the young people were Black, and also that it was less likely that the male young people were likely to go to museums than female visitors. So we kind of know quite a lot about the kind of context, the way that museums the barriers to visiting museums for children, young people and families. So we want to kind of tackle those things with the work that we do. So I thought I'd go through some of the work that we do with these age groups and different audiences. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our Family Friendly Museum Award is the only award in the UK that's judged by families. And our overall winner this year was the National Emergency Services Museum. So that's a museum that looks at things like the police, the fire service, and also the ambulance service as well. And families really loved that museum, and they fed back to us that they really liked the relaxed atmosphere and extremely friendly staff. There were loads of interactive fun things to do, and they could actually climb on the emergency services vehicles. So all of the vehicles in the museum they were able to climb on. They really liked the facilities in the museum, the fact that there was a picnic area for them, a buggy park, and the ticketing was really cheap as well, so it's cheaper to get into the museum. And also they fed back that they liked the opportunity to talk about the emergency services in an age appropriate way for their children, so they really liked that. And they actually got 95% rating out of 100 by the family judges that went to visit them, which was amazing. And I think all of our shortlisted museums here, 80%, they all got over 80% feedback from families. So it's really great to hear that they all had really high scores. And you can see the Museum of Making, that museum I mentioned in Derby, was actually one of our winners of the best medium category. So that's really lovely to see. So then I thought I'd talk about Takeover Day. So I mentioned at the beginning that Takeover Day is where children and young people take over staff roles for the day. And we've been running this since 2010, so for over 12 years now. And about 40,000 children and young people have taken part since then. Around 5,000 children and young people aged 0 to 25 actually take part every year with Takeover Day. So we have kind of really small children all the way up to older children doing the takeovers. In terms of what they do actually take over, they take over staff roles, so front of house roles, for example. So they might be visiting, they might be kind of welcoming visitors to the museum, telling them what to do in the museum, where to go. They might be tour guides, so giving tours of the museum for visitors, or giving objects in focus talks as well. They're really, really popular. They also run sessions. So the picture down there on the left is of a museum in Wales, and they trained up the young people from a local school to kind of lead a workshop about climate change and protest, and so the children could create these banners that they could use and put up in their school. So that was a workshop they did. And in terms of kind of the long-term success of Takeover Day, the picture there in the lower right hand side, that's of a museum in the UK called the Wallace Collection. And what they've been doing for quite a number of years pre-pandemic is they work with a local school to do tours of the museum. And that worked so well on Takeover Day that they now do that every Saturday. So every time you come to the museum on a Saturday, those school children are doing tours for visitors, and the visitors give really good feedback about the tours. Also, it can be a really good opportunity for children and young people to co-create, to create things with the museum and for the museum. So things like films. So there's a museum down in the southwest of England who's worked with a local deaf school, and they've created a film, an introduction film to the museum in British Sign Language, which went on their website so that all visitors, deaf visitors who use sign language, could actually see what was available in the museum and what they could expect before they visited. A lot of museums work with children and young people to create displays and exhibitions. So the picture at the top here is from the National Justice Museum, which is in Nottingham, and they worked with a local school last year to create an exhibition about climate protest, and actually that opened at the beginning of this year, and they invited the children back to see what they've done. It can also be a great opportunity to consult with young people about what they'd like to see in the museum in the future. So some museums do that as well as part of Takeover Day. So in terms of what Takeover Day can offer museums, so it can be a really good opportunity for museums to try different things, so new ways of working or working with new audiences or partners. So we don't just have museums working with school children. It can be lots of different organisations locally, work experience students, uniform groups like guides and brownies, youth groups as well, so a whole range of different groups. It could be a really good opportunity for museums to kind of get a new platform for their work, to shout about what they do with children and young people. And so often we get a lot of museums that bring along people like the mayor of the city, or important people to come along, or the director of the museum to come and see what's happening on the day. It can be a really good opportunity for all staff in the museum to get involved as well. So even if those staff don't always work with children and young people, it can be a really good opportunity for them to get involved. And for young people, it can be a really great opportunity for them to learn about different careers within the museum sector. It can mean they develop new skills. So we know that museums are great places for young people and children to develop things like communication skills, sort of talking to people they don't know and kind of building that confidence. But it can also be a great opportunity for them to get to know the museum and feel like it belongs to them. So that sense of ownership. And we know that the feedback from children and young people about taking over staff roles, they really enjoy that and they really feel like that museum belongs to them. So the feedback from museums, this is from last year's Takeover Day, which had a climate theme, so climate emergency theme. We had some feedback from one museum saying, we enjoy working in this way. It allows us to engage in more depth with different groups. It was such a success. Even staff raved about it, as they had never been engaged with young people before. So the opportunity to get engaged and work with young people, which they hadn't done, is something that we hear quite often. And also digital takeovers. So as I mentioned, that that's where young people take over digital platforms for the day, so Twitter, Instagram, etc. Last year we had sort of 3.9 million reach on Twitter. We do still get quite a lot of engagement on Twitter, even though other platforms are taken over in museums. So yeah, you can see the statistics there. But in terms of what they take over and what they do, it can be a really great opportunity for young people to sort of, you can see your collections through young people's eyes. So and a lot of the posts they make can be quite playful and fun. So on the left hand side we've got the Museum of the Order of St John, and when young people took over this their account a few years ago, they matched emojis to the artworks in the museum. At Bristol Museum, some young people were posing as the artworks in the museum. And then another museum, the young people were interviewing staff about what they were doing on a sort of typical day in the museum. So it can be a really good opportunity for other people to find out what happens behind the scenes in a museum, and what kind of jobs people do and what their day-to-day life looks like. So in terms of what Digital Takeover Day can offer museums, obviously that kind of digital platform to kind of shout about the fact you're working with young people. It can be a really good opportunity for young people to gain those digital marketing skills. So we get a lot of feedback from young people. They really like that opportunity to gain those kind of more work-based skills rather than using social media with friends and family. It's a very different way of using social media. Having that trust and confidence to speak in public, which they probably didn't realise they would be given. And we get some really nice exchanges with different young people taking over different accounts across the country and speaking to each other. So last year, because of the climate emergency theme, there were some really nice discussions with young people about that. And also it gives young people that great opportunity to get behind the scenes and get to know the collections in their local museums really well. And in terms of what that offers for organisations, as I mentioned before, it can be that really great opportunity for museums to see their collections in different ways, get to understand what young people like about your collections, what kind of subjects and themes are coming up for them and what's relevant to them. Can give them a platform to kind of communicate their relevance to young people outside of the museum sector, and also can be a really good opportunity to pick up some new followers. So Westminster Abbey, quite a big cathedral in the UK, picked up 80 new followers in 24 hours on their Instagram account, because they'd only just launched their Instagram account a few months before doing the digital takeover with young people, and people really enjoyed those posts and they got a lot of followers because of that. So just a bit of feedback from museums about Digital Takeover Day. So the most successful element was seeing the young people develop their Twitter voice throughout the day, moving from the more structured setup introductions to interpreting the works of the museum and gardens in their own way, with their own humour. They were a fantastic group of young people and enjoyed taking control of the account. They respected the tone of the museum and learned about the difference between personal and professional tweets, which I think is valuable. And then in terms of what young people fed back to us as well, they really enjoy creating the content, having that freedom and that responsibility as well. So just a bit of a roundup of other work that we do at Kids in Museums. So as I mentioned, we do quite a lot of training consultancy. That's a lot of my role. And we do a lot of obviously online training now since the pandemic. And we do things like family friendly audits as well, to sort of audit museums and see how family friendly they are and give them recommendations. We also do a lot of listing and sharing of family events for museums on our website and on our social media. So you can see here on the left-hand side a bit of a roundup of some activities that museums are running in the summer this year for families to have a look at. We also do a lot of collaborations with publishers. So you might have heard of Where's Wally. We've done Where's Wally trails with Walker books and hidden Wallies around museums across the UK. And last year, sorry, at the beginning of this year, we did something called Super Silly Museums to coincide with the book that came out with the same name. And that was used across museums in the UK. So you can see here, children and families had to find different things that rhymed with each other. So something blue, a shoe and something in a pair. So really good fun for children to do. And then there was a competition at the end. And then we also have a youth panel and young trustees at the museum, at Kids in Museums as well. So as part of our board, we have 2 young trustees who are aged 18 to 25. We also have a youth panel because obviously our staff aren't young people anymore. We want to make sure we're representing that young people's voice on our panel and our kind of board. So our youth panel is made up of 10 young people aged between 18 to 25, and we meet on a monthly basis and we do projects, and the projects are kind of based on what the young people want to do. So when they first started with us, they did things like doing digital takeovers, takeover day, and also judging our family friendly museum award. In 2020 they created an online exhibition on Instagram about the climate emergency and using museum objects to kind of look at the past and inform the future. They've done things like a sort of online training for museum staff, and they were part of our conference and actually programmed an entire strand of our conference in 2021. They also wanted to do some events on food poverty and anti-racist practice, and we run those events. They ran those events last year, so they kind of programmed those and delivered those last year. And this year we're just starting to work on creating a podcast which will kind of look at our family friendly museum award winners. They've chosen some of the winners of those of the award that will kind of work really well with young people, so they want to go and interview some of the staff and the young people, so we're just putting together that now. So what I thought I'd do now is kind of just stop the presentation for a few moments and just see if anyone's got any questions before talking about the manifesto. So I'm just going to stop sharing for the time being. So Nessa, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or comments so far. Thomas?
Yes, hi, very good presentation, congratulations. Just wanted to ask, your organization is a charity, yes?
Yes.
You mentioned that you do consultancy and coaching and training. Can you expand a little bit on that, please? What sort of consultancy and training do you deliver?
Yeah, so in terms of our training, I suppose we look at what the sector needs. So some training that we've got coming up, for example, we've got some training for front of house staff around working with families with additional needs. I think, as I mentioned about that ecclesiastical survey around kind of barriers to kind of staff, I suppose, understanding sort of behaviour of children with additional needs or families that might have additional needs in their spaces. It's something that's come up quite a lot, and we get a lot of feedback. So we're going to be doing some training on that in a couple of weeks' time. We've done things, we've got coming up some training around kind of working with young people around the climate emergency and how they can work with them and kind of, I suppose, think about things like anxiety and how the sort of staff can support that going forward in museums. Well, I'm trying to think what else we do. So some individual museums might sort of, I suppose, ask us to do training just for their team. So a couple of weeks ago, I was doing some training for an historic mill, so a cotton mill up in the northwest of England, about working meaningfully with young people. So it's usually about sort of confidence building, but also kind of skills, maybe about working with particular audiences. So that's what we do. Does that kind of help you answer your question?
Thank you.
Brilliant. Has anyone got any other questions? Oh, I think Dorina had a question. So what mechanisms does your museum use for audience engagement? So I suppose we're not technically, well, we're not a museum, but we I suppose what we call ourselves is a sector support organisation. So we work with museum staff. So a lot of things that we do, as you said, we've got our initiatives. So it's about kind of getting more museums to kind of engage and kind of co-create and work with children and young people and gain that confidence. So that's a lot of things that we do. So it's more about kind of working with museum staff rather than working with people directly. But I suppose our youth panel is one way that we do work with the audience directly, and our family judges as well is another way we do that. So most of our work is with museum staff. Does that help, Dorina? Thanks, Dorina. Okay, So if anyone hasn't got any other questions for now, I might go into the second half, which is talking about our manifesto and how to meet our 6 points. Does that sound okay, Inessa?
Sorry, yeah. If anyone has any question, we can leave them for later at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, so I've definitely got some time at the end as well to answer any more questions that you might have. Okay, I'll start sharing again. Okay, so now, as I said, I'm going to talk about our manifesto. So basically with our manifesto, museums can sign up. So we've got over 1,000 museums across the UK, but also across the world. So if any of you are interested after this signing up, you can sign up for free. You just fill in an online form on our website, and then you get added to our online map and also our organisational list. So you can be part of this as well if you'd like to be. So basically, it's an audit tool. It can be used in a variety of different ways, but a lot of museums use it as a bit of an audit tool to kind of find out where they're at with their kind of engagement with children, young people and families, and where they maybe want to get to. And it can be a really great way of kind of bringing on board kind of your staff across the organisation to be more family friendly. So a lot of museums use this with staff to kind of do some training and kind of look at where their role fits in with our manifesto. It can be a really good opportunity for museums also to sort of show their visitors their values. So the fact that they're trying to be family friendly. We're not saying that you have to meet every particular point to be able to sign up. It's just saying that you've got that commitment to want to meet the manifesto points. So it's a really good framework for improvement. Also, you can promote this to your family audience. So basically, when you sign up, you get this little logo that's on the slide here, which you can then put on your museum website or kind of across your social media platforms or any of your sort of marketing materials to families to show you've got that commitment. And also, as I mentioned, it can be an advocacy document. So if you kind of need to convince people maybe higher up in your organisation, like directors, to be more family friendly, because this is put together with children, young people and families, it's seen very much as a sector standard. So a standard that everyone should kind of work towards in the UK, but across the world as well. So I thought I'd go through each manifesto point and then point out a few things that you could do to kind of meet that point. So our first point is about being welcoming. So when we did our consultation with children, young people and families, they kind of felt this was really, really important. So they want to be able to be made to feel safe and welcome, can make or break a family visit. So create environments where families can explore, have fun, play and learn together. Ensure staff and volunteers provide a warm welcome and make interactions with all family members accessible, friendly and informative. Include things that can be touched and make labels clear to explain when they can't. Welcome enthusiastic comments, always keep instructions positive and provide easy to read text for all ages. So I thought I'd point out a few things that you could do to meet this particular point. So, for example, what are interactions like for families throughout a visit? So if you've got kind of front of house staff or volunteers that are kind of speaking to families or other visitors on a visit, we get a lot of feedback from families. They don't really like it when maybe front of house staff just talk to adults in the group, or maybe just ignore the family because they're a family and they're not just adults. So having that in those interactions with the family and with the children as well in that group has been really important, and that feedback comes across very strongly from families. What have you got on offer for families in your museum? So are there hands-on things that children can touch? Are there things like trails or kind of sheets that that families can do in your museum? So can you communicate that to families when they arrive at the museum? So that might be through a staff member or a volunteer telling them what to do, or it could be through a sign. So this sign here with the tiger is from Leeds City Museum, and they were one of our winners from the Family Friendly Museum Award a few years ago. They had this mascot, a tiger, and basically he appears in the museum on their trails, on their sort of guidance sheets, and also as signage throughout the museum. So it tells you what galleries are family friendly, but also if they've got activities on for children, where they can pick those up and what they can do. Also thinking about what families can and can't touch. So for some museums in the UK, they have objects on open display, so not in display cases, they're just out. And for a lot of families, that can cause quite a lot of distress and confusion because they don't know if they can touch it or not. So they're telling their children off for not touching it. So can they touch it or can they not? So they kind of want to know that, but also they want to know why. So is there a particular reason why that particular object can't be touched? So is it so old and so delicate that it can't be touched? But having that information is really useful for adults in the group to kind of explain that to their children. So we've got an example here from a museum in the south coast of England, and so they've got these nice thumbs up, thumbs down signs, so really clear about what children can and can't touch throughout the museum. Also having easy to read text. So families have fed back again really strongly to us that they don't like having lots and lots of information to read through, particularly if they've got children with them. They need some really easy to digest text. That's not saying it's dumbing it down. It's just saying that they just need that information in a really, really clear way, and keeping it interactive and fun as well can be a really good way of children learning. So we've got a few examples here. So the one in the middle is from an exhibition that the Horniman Museum in London had. So that was all about Permian creatures, and so basically it was kind of asking families to do something by looking at looking really carefully at all of the creatures, and kind of creating a competition within the family group to pull a scary face. The Tate, they did quite a lot of signs as part of an exhibition they had a few years ago, and kind of they kind of picked out a few artworks that are really family friendly and got families to really pay attention to those artworks and kind of get the adults in that group to ask questions to the children in the group. The one at the bottom, they've got a new mascot who's this eagle, and so it's kind of asking the family to look at some of the kind of recipes on the table and sort of thinking about how they relate that to their own life. So what food do they like? Is there anything on the recipes that they've seen on the table that they'd like to eat? The next point is about being accessible. So ensure all visitors are equally supported and welcome. Families face many challenges when visiting museums, including economic, language and cultural barriers. Consider the costs and practicalities of a whole museum visit from the perspective of a family. Deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people may experience barriers to accessing your space, activities, displays and digital resources. Families need clear online information such as an access page to confidently plan their visit. Consider a full spectrum of access needs, review your provision and consult with a range of families about making a visit more accessible. So in terms of kind of being accessible, as I mentioned, that's something that we do quite a lot of work around, and actually sort of having that information on your website before families come and other visitors come to visit you about how accessible your site is. So are there steps to get into the museum, or are there ramps? So for people with mobility issues, what kinds of things can visitors expect to see? So there's a report at the end of this that I'm going to flag. If anybody wants to look at this in more detail, there's some really good information about what to put on your access page. Also creating things like sensory backpacks, so things that families can borrow from the museum to make their visit better, particularly if those children have got additional needs. So things like torches if there's really dark spaces, things like kind of feely things to handle, so that if children are getting stressed, they've got something to hold. So again, I've got some really good resources at the end of this to kind of share with you if you're interested in developing one of those. And also thinking about economic barriers as well. So a museum that was shortlisted for our Family Friendly Museum Award a few years ago, they looked at how much it would cost for a family of 3, so 1 adult and 3 children, to visit the museum during a holiday period, so half term, and whether they were doing an activity or not. So how much it would cost them to do for a whole day out at the museum, to sort of see whether it was something that families in their local area could afford, because they're in an area where there's quite a lot of low economic, it's quite an area where there's you know, not a lot of money for families, so they really wanted to keep it very cheap for a day out. So the next point is about making it easy and comfortable. So families are more likely to stay longer if your facilities and spaces are more family friendly. Provide seating for all generations to enjoy a rest, a quiet space and free Wi-Fi. Make pocket money items available in the shop. Can you make your cafe family friendly and reasonably priced? provide a picnic area or direct people to eateries nearby. Having baby changing facilities, a breastfeeding welcome attitude, and somewhere to keep buggies is important for those with younger visitors. Can you provide a changing places toilet or signpost visitors to the nearest one? So I just, again, point out a few things for that. So are sort of pushchairs allowed in the museum or buggies? If they're not, then can you provide something like a buggy park? So somewhere that families can leave those when they're exploring the museum. How family friendly are the toilets? So can children reach the taps in the toilets, or do they have to get picked up by their parents to do that? So if they do need to be picked up, can they have a little stool so they can stand on that and do it themselves? Can you provide things in an emergency? So some museums have started doing this now, so spare nappies or clothes. So if the families are kind of caught short and they need some things, then the museum can provide that for the families. Also, families are more likely than other visitors in the UK to want to bring their own food with them on a museum visit. So can you provide an area for families to eat their own lunch? And then seating. So even if a family doesn't have, say, a grandparent with them, a lot of families do like that opportunity to have a rest during a visit. So can you provide some seating? In the UK, there's a scheme called the Breastfeeding Welcome Scheme, which museums can sign up to. It's legal in all public spaces for parents to breastfeed their children, but we want to make sure that that families feel really sort of safe and welcome to do that in spaces and don't get told off for doing it. So we always kind of champion this. Also, if there's a cafe in the museum, can you have kind of children's portions so that the children can eat as well as the adults? And we've got some really good resources I'll share at the end about shop and cafe resources. So moving on to point 4, so remember that families come in all different shapes and sizes. So consider what different family members need from their visit and provide ways for them to enjoy themselves together. Family groups can be diverse, from large multi-generational families to single parents or carers. They can include under 5s, young people, children with additional needs, same-sex couples and grandparents. Reflect this diversity in your language, activities, displays and ticketing. So thinking about inclusivity, we kind of think a bit about language. So rather than using kind of mum, dad or parents, we might use grown up instead, because we don't know if they are their parent or not. Thinking about kind of the child, just call them the children, because again, we don't know what the relationship with the adult is for that child. Extended family, so just calling them the family group, because again, we don't know what the relationship is with the parents or grandparents in that family. And also thinking about sort of saying you look like your mum or your dad, when actually it might not be their mum or their dad. So kind of keeping those things to yourself, so not kind of sharing that with the family, so that you don't have that uncomfortable conversation with them on a visit. And then thinking about what you can do to kind of provide activities for all ages. So not just kind of say primary school age, so kind of 5 to 11-year-olds, but thinking about under 5s, is there something you can do for them? This really nice idea from one of our Family Friendly Museum Award winners was having this little laminated thing that children could wear around their necks. And then they had things they could spot in the museums. That was particularly for younger children. And for young people, they really like to have some sort of different thing for them, because they find that we get the complaints from young people sort of over the age of 11, there's nothing for them to do in the museum. So People's History Museum in Manchester created this selfie trail, so something that young people could do. So the next one is about communicating well. So make sure you let families know everything you have to offer them. You can do this through outreach visits, posts and leaflets, and your website and social media. Provide easy to find pre-visit information online, information on arrival, and a way for families to get in touch and give feedback. Make sure all your content is accessible, represent a diverse range of families in your marketing images. So again, we did some, when we were doing our manifesto consultation, we asked families about the way they want to be communicated with by museums, and the top three ways they want to be communicated with was Facebook, their website, and newsletters. So I suppose on your kind of social media, it was kind of making sure that there were family friendly images. So if you couldn't have children on your social media, sort of images of children, and maybe having sort of activities showing what they were doing. So this really nice example here from the Herbert Museum was kind of their play activity. So you can see how much fun the children had in the session, because it's really messy. And then having a family page on your website, sort of explaining what families can expect when they come to the museum, all in one place, was something that families really fed back. They really wanted that information. So answering those frequently asked questions, like can they bring buggies to the museum? Can they eat their own lunch? So things that families really want to know before they come. And this example here from the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum, which again was one of our shortlisted museums. So they've got this really clear 6 things you can do in the museum so that families know what they can expect before they come. There's lots of things for them to do when they get there. And the final one is be an active part of your community. So young people and families want to see museums help tackle inequality, support their well-being, and take care of the local environment. Consult and collaborate with a diverse range of children, young people and families in your community as equal partners on events, displays and exhibitions. This will help you make your site more relevant, reflect their stories and give this audience a stronger sense of ownership over their histories and heritage. So that's something that we do a lot of work around, is kind of that collaboration with children and young people and working together. So Leeds City Museum, again, our Family Friendly Museum award winner a few years ago, they have a community corridor. They do a lot of work with local young people and children to sort of put on displays in that corridor. They also have this display case on the sort of far right hand side of this picture, which displays work that children have created when they've done activities in the museum. So they display this next to the shop so lots of visitors can see. They also have a youth panel like us, and they create labels in exhibitions by the young people as well. So that's the example here on the right. And then collaborating and consulting with visitors as well. So this really simple example here is from the People's History Museum. So they do a song session with under 5s, like babies, every week, and they were getting the families to vote on which song they wanted to hear in the next session. So something really nice. They just had to put either a counter or some money in each one side of the blackboard, and then they could decide which song they were going to sing in the next session. So that's the kind of manifesto points. And then I'll just quickly run through this so that then we can go to any questions before we finish, just aware of time. So those are some of those context reports that I mentioned at the beginning. So if you want to have a delve into those, that's all the links there. That's our Takeovers Day resources. We've got a whole range of different things, including a film, so you can sort of see what happens on a Takeovers Day. It's a really nice film, shows kind of what the young people really get out of that day. We have access resources if you do want to kind of look at making your site more welcoming and inclusive for sort of families that have got additional needs. Then we've got a lot of resources, and also kind of looks at if you want to create your own access page on your website. The Sending Museums website is a really good one. It talks you through everything from getting started to kind of if you're a little bit further on. So it's a really good website, that one. And then our manifesto resources, so you can find out all about our manifesto in more detail. And also we have a no and low cost ways to meet the manifesto, which kind of goes into a bit more detail than what I've sort of presented this afternoon. So you can look at those. That's the shop and cafe resource that I mentioned, which was developed with families about what they wanted to see museum shops and cafes offer for families. We also have a template for creating your own family page, and we also have a marketing resource, so it goes into a lot more detail about marketing to families as well. And then that's our website, and that's my email address. If you do want to get in touch after today, on our website we do actually have a newsletter, so if you want to sign up to that, you can do that via our website as well. So that's a quick run through of our manifesto and everything that we do. So hopefully that was in enough time and kind of helpful for everybody. But if anyone's got any final questions, then I'm happy to answer them. And it's a lot of information. Just give me.
You mentioned sensory backpacks earlier in this presentation. Can you I have been in museums here in UK that they have the sensory backpacks, but can you give us some more information? Have you been helping museums to create these ones, or how it functions?
Yeah, so we did do some training a couple of weeks ago for museums. We work with the Sending Museums person who's called Sambo, and she's brilliant. And her child has got additional needs, and she She says the two things that all museums can do to help families are having a sensory backpack and having website information. An access page is really, really useful, because I suppose the access page is your window to you visiting. So you won't visit unless you kind of got that information, you know, that you can access the museum. In terms of what's in the sensory backpacks, a lot of museums have things like puppets to sort of help sort of the child, particularly if they've got, say, maybe got sensory issues. The puppet can help them explore the museum. They're just concentrating on the puppet rather than all the sounds, all the kind of busyness that's going on around them. It really concentrates them. Things like fidget toys. So again, if the child is getting upset because there's too much going on, then things like a toy that they can just play with so that they're not getting too upset, and that just need a bit of time to sort of take some quiet time, can be really useful. Things like ear defenders. So if particularly there's a museum with lots of noise, that can really trigger a lot of children with sensory needs. So having that kind of putting the earphones on can really just mean that they're not having to concentrate on the sound. But the Sending Museums website is, I'll add the link on. They've got a really, she's got a really good breakdown of what you should put in your backpacks and some really good case studies. So I won't do it justice now, but yeah, she's got some really good ideas about what to put in, because there's all things like symbols as well that you can put in to sort of help families plan their visit as well. But yeah, her website is a really good place to go for that.
Okay, thank you. I will check it. Is it like these kind of sensory backpacks are used for the museum or very specific exhibitions, and are like the sensory backpacks, they change it every time they have like a new exhibition?
It depends on the museum. So some museums, I suppose, just might just have it on their permanent display. So things that they can use. So it doesn't matter what the exhibition is, they can just use it. It may be in one gallery or a couple of galleries. I think some theme them. So they might, if they've got a temporary exhibition that's very family friendly, they might create one for the exhibition. So it just depends on the museum and the size and I suppose the budget as well. They're not really expensive to create, but obviously it does take time to kind of develop them. So.
Okay, thank you. Another question is that you said that in KidsinMuseums website, you can like sign up and your museum or your organization can be part of the website. It's only for UK museums, or you have been like, oh, it's all over Europe?
Yes, yeah. So the map is worldwide. So yes, any museum across, we've got kind of Australian museums and Swedish museums and a whole range of museums across kind of Europe and the world, US museums that have signed up as well. So yes, you can definitely, doesn't matter where you are, you can still sign up.
Is there any benefit that they you can provide after they the museums become part of this like network?
So you get your logo, which you can then use. So a lot of museums use it on their website to kind of show how family friendly they are. So that's one thing that we do provide. And with the listing on the website, we can now add sort of an image of your museum and a little bit of information. So if families are looking for places to visit, then that can be a really good place for them to go.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other question? Hi.
Good evening. Good evening from Bhutan. I'm participating from Bhutan, and thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to ask, because you told us that there is something that we can sign in. So can we also sign in, because we are in the Asia side?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, the manifesto is for you can sign up to the manifesto. Any country, doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're very welcome to sign up. So I will, when Inessa sends around the presentation, it's the manifesto link is the one that you can find the sign up for the manifesto.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, there is a question.
What kind of educational program can teach kids about history and culture of their community? So I suppose it depends on the museum, really. I mean, a lot of museums in the UK do school sessions to do that on particular aspects of, I suppose, the history of that area. And also projects. So as I was talking about the Takeover Day projects, some of those do involve kind of the museum talking about the history of the museum and the community, and then creating something with them. So it's usually sort of inspired by the museum's collection. Does that help answer your question? Brilliant. Any other questions?
It looks like there is no more question, but I will also, when I will send the materials, I will send also your email.
Yeah.
And if it's any question or anything they like, any comment, they can send you an email.
Yeah, very welcome to do that. So yeah, please do get in touch if you want to.
Thank
It's
you
been lovely
so
meeting you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for today. Hope we will meet online soon, or maybe in Albania, Balkans, or somewhere else. Thank you so much for everyone attending this session. I will send you the recording and any other material Laura have prepared for you. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon, evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.